Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back once again. My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. I want to thank you guys for joining me for another replay battle. Today we're going to be playing at 1212 AD, and this is a replay that was sent in to me by Gambling. So I'd like to preface this video by saying a big thank you to Gambling for supporting the channel. It's going to be a 2 versus 2 siege, and it's going to be fought in the winter. In the dead of winter. Not exactly the campaign season, but that doesn't seem to mind the Lithuanians and the Alsatians who have come to take this fortress from... Don't know if they're historically hated rivals. Seems no, since they're quite far removed geographically. But they're going to be facing off against the Aragonese and the Kingdom of Jerusalem. So Jerusalem going to be fighting in the snow. Probably not something they're very used to. Hopefully it doesn't have any adverse effects on them. But yeah, I suppose we'll have to see. In any case, let's take a look at some of the army comps here, and then we can get into the replay itself. Hope you guys enjoy it. And naturally, since the Lithuanian player is the one who sent in the replay, we're going to start with his army. He's brought a ton of infantry, as you might expect for someone who's about to storm a fortress. Several units of the spearmen, plus the county spearmen. 14th century, 15th century. I believe that tiers correspond to century, so it's not necessarily a quality distinction. So I think that that's something that may confuse people, and it has certainly confused me a little bit. Is when I pit late period units against an earlier period unit, and sometimes my late period units will lose. So as near as I can tell, and I have had some conversations on the Discord that have given me this impression, but maybe I'm wrong here. But it seems like the century distinctions are really just units tend to have more armor for the most part, but it's not necessarily a guarantor of quality. So something to bear in mind. But yeah, a lot of late period ducal spearmen here, Lithuanian axemen as well, who have a javelin that they toss moments before they clash with enemy lines, which can make them extremely effective shock troops. In behind them, got a lot of retinue archers. For the most part, the bow units I think are uniquely retinue archers for this Lithuanian army. More ducal infantry, ducal heavy axemen. These seem to be like at least given the amount that this player's invested into them, it seems like they are kind of the elite guard. I don't know if that's necessarily the case historically, or even in the mod just generally, but that seems to be the impression that the Gambling has had here. He's invested quite a lot into making them very elite, with 2 silver chevrons apiece. We have 7, no less than 7 siege towers, and I believe that they are all staffed by either ducal infantry or dismounted Bajarija. I've had someone tell me the pronunciation of this before, but I've unfortunately forgotten, since it's probably been a couple of years at this point. So if you guys know how to pronounce that, maybe there's somebody out there who speaks this language, and they could tell me a little bit more about how to say that, because I do like to get my pronunciations correct. It's I'm a linguist by education, so yeah, definitely something I want to try and get straight. Over here, got some Grand Duke's bodyguard, which, surprise, surprise, can have the general in it. Don't know which one of these guys is supposed to be the Grand Duke, but from what I understand, they are generally in the middle, so it might be this fancy-looking guy right here with the big crown. In fact, I'd be willing to bet on it. Over here, Ruthenian Boyars. From what I understand, I'm sure many people out here, if you're watching 1212 a day, you probably have a passion for history, and you already know this. But for those that don't, from what I've learned from studying Russian and a little bit of Russian culture, is the Boyars were kind of like the knightly class. So they don't seem to be quite so heavily armored as many of the Western European counterparts, which seems to be a theme for at least some of the Eastern nations. I imagine if there's a Russia analog, or like a Novgorod in the mod, that they probably function in a similar way. That just seems to be a theme where the Eastern European and Slavic nations, with certain exceptions of course, across mods and across games, tend to be a little bit more lightly armored, but generally do more damage. I don't know where that impression comes from, but, you know, it is what it is. So we have some Smolensk Boyars, yet more Smolensk Boyars, and we seem to have a ram here, which is being commanded by some dismounted Bajarija. Second unit of the ram over here as well, commanded by the Bajarija, and yet more Bajarija. A whole bunch of them. I assume that they're quite good. Let's take a look at some of their traits there. So they have the discipline trait. They also have low stamina. But the discipline trait is pretty significant, because well, I learned this to my detriment in our last and indeed only 1212 AD campaign episode. That when you lose your general, things go really, really poorly for you. So it seems like there's very, very strong morale shocks for losing your general, but units with the discipline trait will ignore that. So it's very useful to have them make up a core of your army, and indeed, Gambling is going to be using them to do a lot of heavy lifting in this battle, certainly if they're going to be on the front lines with the siege towers. Anyway, enough blah blah for me. Got some more spearmen, retinue archers, ducal spearmen, county spearmen, spearmen. Okay, so there's spearmen, ducal spearmen, and county spearmen. I don't know what the difference between them all is. I'm sure someone out there can enlighten me. I'll try to figure that difference on my own a little bit later, but for now you'll have to forgive me, because I won't be able to share the same insights that I can with Reforged, just because I'm very new to this mod. But in any case, that does it for the Lithuanian army. Let's see what's his ally, and that would be the Alsatians, if I'm not incorrect. And it's just a linguistic hodgepodge over here. Wait till you see. There's units that have like German and some French, and also some German, also some English, German, and French. Yeah, see, look how confused it makes me. All mixed into one name, and it's just a total tongue twister. It's beautiful. So I have Rene II here, which is going to be the bodyguard. Let's see if we can spot the king. I assume this is him. He's got a really, really huge feather in his hat. Got some peacock feathers in there too, which are quite beautiful and I imagine fairly valuable. So yeah, I'm going to guess that that's the king with the golden armor there. Got some Noble d'Alsace. 2 units of them there. And I think there's another couple over on this end as well. Yes, indeed. It's a lot of cavalry, which is... I guess it's not that surprising. I'm sure these players kind of know what they're about, and have certainly played a Total War game before. And it's a good idea to have a few units of cavalry if the defenders decide they want to sally on you and be little cheeky buggers about it. So, yeah, probably a prudent decision. A couple units here of the dismounted Noble d'Alsace. 2 units of them. Again, heavily invested into. I guess 200 units like this. Given that it seems a lot of the sword and board units don't have very high armor piercing, and I believe the 2-handed axe units and the halberdiers generally do. So they, at least I'm guessing, and certainly from some of my experiences have reflected this, that the 2-handed units are very good for just cracking through enemy infantry lines, which otherwise can take an exceptionally long time and not necessarily go in your favor. Over here, got some 13th century dismounted Alsatian Ritter, which is, I remember my admittedly very limited German. Ritter is basically chevalier, or a knight in English. So these would be dismounted knights. Essentially, I would call them dismounted feudal knights. They look a lot like them from medieval too. So I'm going to guess this is going to be the workhorse unit, given that they've been brought in such exceptional numbers. About 6 units there. We have some dismounted Alsace-Lorraine Chevalier, and I think they're going to be in a lot of these towers as well. In fact, they are going to be in every single one of these towers. So a workhorse unit there. Out in front, we've got some Lorraine. See, this is great. Lorrainer Pavis Armbrüste, which I think is correct. So yeah, we'll just German thrown in there for good measure, because why not? Alsace being geographically located on the border with Germany, and a source of great contention between the French and the Germans throughout the ages. Got some more dismounted Alsace-Lorraine Chevalier, and I think that we actually have an artillery piece over here as well. Great Bombard. Guess what that's going to be for? Blowing big ass holes in the wall. The thing looks like a oh, pardon me. Looks like a giant plunger to my eye. Yeah, strange. Anyway, moving on. I think that just about does it there for the attacking armies. The Lorraine force seems to be a little bit smaller, at least in terms of infantry, than their ally Lithuania. But they have invested a little bit more into their cavalry, which is generally a bit more expensive. So if the defenders have a fair amount of cavalry, and it appears that they do, then that may stand them in good stead. So we've got a couple factions here, all kind of mixed in, so we're just going to call them as we see them. Got some Aragonese Hidalgo, which I assume is it's like a knight or something like that. I mean, there's a movie with a horse in it that Viggo Mortensen was in. It was called Hidalgo, so I'm really just speculating completely out of my butt. But yeah, hopefully one of my Spanish viewers can tell me what that's all about. Love to, yeah, I'd be fascinated to know. So got some Aragonese Hidalgo, some Templar Knights from the early period, more Hidalgo. What else we got over here? Templar Knights, more Hidalgo, Templar Knights. So a little bit of each in good measure. Got some these bowmen, yeah, some Turcopoles here. Almogovar crossbowmen, so a nice little mix of armor-piercing bolts and some long-ranged bow fire. More crossbowmen. Dismounted Templar Knights, Almocaden. Interesting. They seem to be wearing the Norman nasal helmets, and they've got that distinctive. I don't know if it's called the kite shield. Maybe I just played too many RPGs, but that shape of shield I certainly associate with the Normans. You see it all over the Bayeux Tapestry and in contemporary depictions of the Normans, and I guess sometimes even of the Anglo-Saxons. So maybe it's just a common thing, and I'm just associating with the Normans because that's what I have experience with. But I don't know. Maybe someone out there can enlighten me a little bit and tell me what that's all about. More Templar. You can see the Templar cross all over the place here. And more Turcopoles. Pretty strong frontline force, but from what I understand, 1212 AD, if you're wondering a little bit about the deployment and why it's so strange, 1212 AD replays will crash if you move anything during the deployment phase. They'll just become useless. So that's probably what's going on here. The players are wise to that. Moving on over here, got some Poulain Knights, which are pretty cool actually. If you guys are watching 1212, or you are playing 1212, and then you're probably passionate about history. But the Poulains were, from what I recall from the books I have read, they were a class of young noblemen that were born in the Holy Lands after the First Crusade claimed the city for Christendom. And in many cases they were bilingual, and they were a little bit more socially liberal their wives certainly had a much more active role in society. They were given a lot more freedom, to the point where it actually shocked their European counterparts whenever they would come to visit Outremer, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and at least from what I read, and I'm sure that's a very big generalization, there are certainly instances where the French, and the predominantly French in any case, there were a few, there were some German-speaking nobles and knights there as well, but they weren't quite so common, so I'm just going to say French from now on. I'm sure they got into all kinds of tensions and fights with their neighbors, but for the most part, I believe the Poulains were able to fairly peacefully coexist with the Hebrews and the Muslims that lived within inside of their territory and in Jerusalem proper. So, a fun little tidbit there. So we're going to have some of the Poulains on the field today. Turcopoles, which are the mounted version of the dismounted Turcopole. Surprise, surprise. And they're going to be medium bow cavalry. And I assume that they are Muslim Turks, but I admit to having a little bit of a gap in my knowledge there in terms of the Turcopoles. Got a few artillery emplacements up on the walls. Some of them I'm sure we'll see use, others maybe not so much. And then over here, what do we got? Ooh, Maronite spearmen, dismounted Aragonese hidalgos. A lot of hidalgos on the field. They seem to be quite important, so I'd love to know what exactly they are and what role they served in the Aragonese armies. Got some Templar bodyguard, King's bodyguard. Ooh, got some pikes as well. Dismounted Poulain knights. Peones. Peones? Like peons? Is that like... Does it come from like the Latin root for foot, which I think is like ped or pedi or peda or something close to that? I don't know. Couldn't say. Not for sure anyways. Dismounted Crusader Knights. Early period. Wow. It says early period, but some of these helmets I think are a little bit later period. Talking about the nasal helms. I can't remember the name of this kind of helmet, but I think this one came out a little bit later after the, let's say the kettle helm. What's the name of the one? It's like the chapeau de fer, the one that's flat on top. And I believe people adopted this conical shape to the helmet just because it takes a lot of stress off the top of your head if you ever get hit. Like a flat helmet, you can imagine getting something dropped on your head, it would break your neck, and that'd be it for you. Anyway, moving on. Peones, Almacaden, get more of them. More Almacaden. Crapton of dismounted Crusader Knights, some more dismounted Poulain Knights. Ooh, but they're high period. I want to see what they look like. Lanceros, which that's an easy one. That's just spearmen. Dismounted Poulain Knights. Oh yeah, there we go. Damn, they look cool. Really, really cool. I gotta say, I love the models in this game. It's just... they're just way too well done. Probably this is... I think this is going to be the thing that, like, takes my time away from Rise of Mordor and basically is the reason that I still keep Attila installed on my computer. But anyway, so all that side banter aside, that's going to do it for the army comps. Let's go ahead and jump into the replay. Hope you guys enjoy it. And a blast from that Great Bombard is going to kick off this battle. See some of the towers beginning to crumble here as the battlement's already quite weakened by the fact that I believe this is a settlement done on quite advanced levels of escalation. A lot of the battlements are already at the point of crumbling, even on their own, without the addition of massive cannonballs being shot out of those bombards, collapsing the stonework. All about the gatehouse here, you can see some early casualties here on this unit of foot Turcopoles. Looks like the Jerusalem player is regretting having that unit up there. Good place for them to be once the enemy infantry begins to advance on the walls, but at the moment, for the time being, they are very much easy prey for the artillery, as the defenders seemingly don't have any answers to them. They did have a few artillery bastions, but it seems as though, pardon me, those have been knocked out a little bit early. What do we got here? We do have a bastion cannon. Not too sure what they're trying to shoot at. They might be trying to counter-snipe some of the artillery from the Lithuanians, which I missed earlier on. But they don't seem to be terribly effective at it. Haven't really seen any muzzle flashes. Ooh, what are they going after? Instead, they're going to go for the infantry and fall just short and not hurt anybody. I've never seen that happen before. That's actually kind of wonderful. I mean, you had the big towers here to go for. Those have been easy targets, but no, instead. It's right there. This guy's just like got his foot rested on it defiantly. Lithuania now repositioning themselves. I think this might be the beginning of a general assault upon the walls. And who's going to be standing in their way? Well, it looks like it is predominantly going to be Jerusalem manning this this section of the ramparts. Got some high period dismounted Pule knights sitting here in the breach created by the Lithuanian cannon. Seems like a good place for them to be. More and more reinforcements moving their way into the back lines, getting themselves well positioned to repel this assault. And it is worth noting as well, there's a small contingent here outside the walls. This is looking like this is going to be largely led by the Aragonese. So a couple units of Levy Spearmen there, some Aragonese Hidalgos, 2 units of them in fact. It's going to present a very potentially significant menace to the left wing of the Lithuanian host as they advance forward towards the ramparts. But let's see what their ally is doing. Their ally is being a little bit more cautious, slowly advancing. You can see a vanguard here of 2 units of Pavis Langstekaman moving towards the breaches that they've created in the walls. I think we might get another breach here pretty shortly. Yeah, that cannon's going off. Let's see, widening this breach would certainly make things difficult for the defenders. This would be a huge, a very large, wide open area that they're going to have to defend against some pretty, I guess, a pretty serious numbers advantage. Ooh, and there goes another rampart. It's going to collapse down. Luckily, it didn't hurt anybody. Luckily for the defenders, that is. Now there's this massive breach in the walls that is, as I said, going to be quite difficult for them to try and defend, especially with more and more holes being made in the walls. And over here, Jerusalem coming under heavy assault by the Lithuanians. Get in there and enjoy some glorious medieval combat. And the outnumbered defenders seem to be holding their ground quite well against that mass of Lithuanian axemen. Got some close infantry support here from Aragon, and also some foot Turcopoles who are perfectly positioned to rain down hell into the Lithuanian axe blob. But it doesn't seem like the Lithuanians were able to take advantage of their projectile weapons either. So that's going to be quite unfortunate for them. That would have that kind of attrition wasn't something that the defenders would be able to keep up with. Let's see what we got in the back here. A few units of Red New Archers trying to answer back to the foot Turcopoles behind the line. All across the line now, you can see Lithuania have reached the ramparts. And what do we have up here? Some dismounted Bachelor Regia. They've already got a very strong presence on the walls, and they're largely unopposed. That's going to present some pretty serious problems for the defenders. They needed to be able to bottle them up as they were coming out of these siege towers here and inflict maximum casualties. This is going to be a battle of attrition, and the defenders are not going to come out on top if they are just going 1-to-1. There's quite a lot more of the Lithuanian and the it's not the Aragonese, that'd be the Alsatians, than there are the Jerusalem and Aragonese defenders. So they really need to take advantage of every opportunity that presents itself, and this is an opportunity that they let slip by them, and we'll see if that has any consequences for them. So now a very strong Lithuanian presence on the other side of the wall, virtually unimposed. They took the ramparts, they took the lower part of the wall, and now they'll be able to freely move reinforcements up here and circumvent this valiant defender choke points. And of course, if Gambling so chooses, he can move some of his retinue archers up there onto that tower and use the battlements against the defenders. That seems like that's what he's doing right now. Let's pop on over to the other side, where a battle has well and truly been joined here, as the Alsatians are spearheading their own assault against, I believe this is mostly this is Jerusalem as well. Jerusalem trying to hold both choke points simultaneously. It's very bold. It seems like a lot of the Aragonese are held in reserve for the most part. I could be wrong about that. What we got over here? Some dismounted Hospitalier Knights, so what I presume to be some of the more elite forces in the Jerusalem army being held in reserve here. They still have a catapult, so there is there's a chance here. The wide open nature of this breach in the wall could well play to their advantage, given the artillery and the positioning and the missile troops that they are able to leverage against this attacker push. Popping on over here. Dismounted Crusader Knights seem to be doing well against the Lithuanian X-Men. They have repulsed a few units of them so far, sending them fleeing for the hills. There are quite a lot of them left, however, so I imagine that they'll return. It seems like the Lithuanian assault on this choke point here is stalling out a little bit. However, down here, this one unit of dismounted Basharija holding off 2 units of Crusader Knights and a unit of Templar Knights as well. They're going to charge their way in there. Let's enjoy this glorious melee. It's a beautiful thing indeed. And what do we have over here? Looks like there's a bit of a fight going on outside the walls as well. The Jerusalem cavalry, along with some very outnumbered companies from the Aragonese, trying to hold back this storm of Lithuanian cavalry. We had some Templar Knights charging in there against some Ducal Spearmen, getting a beautiful flanking charge. It seems to be serving them in great stead. Those Ducal Spearmen not really able to stand up to that kind of pressure. What do we have over here? The Grand Duke's bodyguard, himself on the front lines. Aragonese cavalry regiments beginning to fall apart. Now it's going to be down to the Templars and what little support that they can leverage from those towers up there. This would be a great place to have some archers. And it's unfortunate that the defenders aren't up there. These crossbowmen right here, these Almogavar crossbowmen, they are certainly missed up here on the walls. That being said, there is a bit of a danger here from some of the dismounted Basharija. Again, another reason why it did not serve the defenders' interest to let Gamling take the ramparts so easily. Cycle charge after cycle charge, along with a renewed effort here from the Levy Spearmen, driving back some of the Ducal Spearmen. Some much-needed reinforcements from Alsace, however, seem to be tipping the tide in favor of Gamling's troops, who were previously getting hammered quite hard. That being said, Gamling's generals on the front lines against some pretty decent cavalry here. The Templar Knights seem to be doing well against the Grand Duke's bodyguard against all odds. Although now that's starting to turn around. But bear in mind, they are under missile fire from the walls. I think part of the problem that the defenders are having out here was that there just wasn't enough of a committal. The forces from Gamling were already keeping the defenders quite hard pressed and on the back foot, and then with the addition of some reinforcements from Alsace, there wasn't really a whole lot that they can do. So even now, the Templar units are falling apart. One unit engaged in combat with the Grand Duke's bodyguard. They'll be able to hold out for a little while, but once these allied cavalry units here from the attackers manage to free themselves from the entanglements of the Templar Knights and what remains of the Aragonese, they're going to swoop down on these Templar Knights and, well, hopefully for Gamling at least, manage to save his bodyguard. But again, if there was more of a committal of some spear units and even some crossbow units up there on the walls, I think they would have been able to, if not win this battle, certainly make the defenders pay a very high toll for conquering this section of the outside the walls. Of the perimeter, I should say. Now over here, Lithuania holding out. Fighting has greatly intensified as more reinforcements have been brought to bear against the Lithuanians. And it seems like Gamling's forces pushing their way through the breach are not doing so well, but really it comes down to it being potentially just a distraction. Ducal infantry coming down from the heights, charging into the rear of some of the Piones. A unit here of Alsace-Lorraine Chevalier. Very, very hard pressed, almost on the verge of routing thanks to some reinforcements here. Meanwhile, over on this end, oh man, it's really anybody's game. The attackers haven't managed to advance too far past the gap, but they have managed to push the line backwards just a little bit. Dismounted Pullian Knights from the High Period now engaged to hold their enemies in place. Lots of crossbow and missile units up there. And let's see. Oh yeah, now we got some beautiful artillery hits. Oh, I think that might have hit more of the defenders than it did of the attackers. A little unfortunate. Ooh, another one. A little bit hit or miss there. It's hard to tell who that did more damage to. Ooh, another nice hit. bouncing into the same area and shooting and exploding into the backs of some of the Jerusalem troops. Definitely not what the defenders want to do. Again, this is a battle of attrition, and it seems to be that the attackers are winning very handily. If you look at the rate of casualties on both sides, the attackers definitely have the edge in this fight. Some reinforcements being brought forward. Meanwhile, some troops being shuttled away from the front lines. Ooh, another breach has been made in the wall. More Alsatian infantry companies pouring their way through. That's going to tie up some of the missile units for the defenders, and it's going to endanger a position that was previously quite favorable for them. They were able to rain down death with impunity upon the attackers, but now the tide has certainly turned. I gotta say, this is a very clutch wall break here. You gotta hand it to the Alsatian player for that. Definitely chose their moment well. Meanwhile, back over here, it seems like the Lithuanians are being beaten back in certain areas, albeit at great cost. And yeah, here we go. Retinue archers up on the battlements, raining down hell upon the... those are Jerusalem crossbowmen. No, those would be the Aragonese crossbowmen. Over here we have a mortar, but it is very much in danger of being caught out. What do we got here? 3 units of Lanceros dealing with a unit of the Smolensk Boyars. They're definitely in a lot of trouble, surrounded on all sides, heavily outnumbered, and by spear units no less. They are going to break, and that will hopefully allow the Aragonese player to reroute some of his forces into this gap here and protect his mortar, which could potentially be a pretty big thorn in the side of the advancing Lithuanians as they move further and further into the castle. Especially now, look at this. This is a very juicy target for that unit of mortar. Let's see what they end up doing. I'm really quite curious. Nothing for the time being. More Lanceros here, holding back a tide of Smolensk Boyars. I think certainly the rear company could be used to maybe fall back and form a defensive line. But it seems the Ruthenian Boyars are going to be able to pull through despite a very thickly packed block of spearmen. They might not all make it, though. Ooh, Smolensk Boyars very much on the verge of routing, and the R&D going to break, and I think they're going to shatter as well. Lithuanians just pouring in now. This big blob of Aragonese spearmen has been freed up, and they're going to form a shield wall right in front of that mortar. This is bad news bears. Ruthenian Boyar is going to circumvent that line and instead go for the soft underbelly of this, dare I call them Spanish? Will I get pilloried in the comment section if I call them Spanish? I won't risk it. The Aragonese line. But that being said, they are turning around now, maybe thinking a little bit better of it. Had some Almogavar crossbowmen nearby. Yeah, might have influenced that decision somewhat. Meanwhile, over here, ooh, it's just a nightmare. Turcopole's firing into the rear of some of these Nobles d'Alsace. And nobles are escorting a couple units here of Lorrainer Pavis Armbruster. And the Aragonese are going to have no choice but to check this advance with a mighty downhill charge. This is going to hurt. Ooh, right into the rear of those crossbowmen. Well, it didn't do the kind of damage I thought it would. It certainly did kill some of them, and they don't like it at all. We could see them rout here. Oh yeah, there's the damage. Half that unit annihilated. Some reinforcements being brought forward. The Almokaden sandwiching these units in here, lending some much-needed support to the Aragonese cavalry. And the Lorrainer Pavis Armbruster do not like that at all. Somehow these Almokaden are being peppered down. Ah, that would be the crossbows. Up here, another unit of Almokaden fighting a unit of late-period knights that somehow managed to get themselves deep, deep behind enemy lines. And it just seems like the Aragonese are just being overwhelmed here on just about every front. They're shuffling some more forces closer to the front here to try and hold this particular section of the battlements, which is a pretty strong area for them to be in. But of course, if this section of the battlefield falls, they do risk being caught out, surrounded, and outflanked, or possibly having the town center sniped out from under them, which would be very unfortunate indeed. And I'll pop them back on over to this end. Seems like the Mordor company has given up. And for some reason, the Almogavar crossmen are now in the battle as well. Not too sure why that would be. A large number of Aragonese infantry fighting hard for this first for this first level of the city, and more forces from Lithuania are pouring in from all sides, and this is looking like it's gonna be a massacre. The Aragonese are basically surrounded on almost every side. It looks like their retreat is about to be cut off here by some ducal axemen, the elite of the Lithuanian army. Yeah, this is a tough fight for the defenders down here. It just seems like the attackers have been far too nimble, far too able to exploit the weaknesses of their opponents, and one of those main weaknesses seems to be a little bit of inattentiveness. Maronite Spearmen here holding out against ducal infantry. The gatehouse isn't lost yet, but it is nearly there. Not over here. Dismounted Crusader Knights fighting in the street against the ducal infantry, but the ducal infantry seem to be getting the better of this fight. I think we're about to see these units begin to rout and flee. There doesn't seem to be a single area of the battlefield any longer where the defenders rather are winning this fight. Although that being said, they are well poised to deal with a very large number of Alsatian Ritter. How are things going up here? It looks like some dismounted Alsatian nobles joining the fray against the Aragonese Hidalgos. And just through sheer numbers, the defenders here are being overwhelmed. What do we got here? The Aragonese king himself joining the fray, charging into the exposed rear of the Alsace-Lorraine Chevalier. Doesn't seem to have had the effect I think that the Aragonese player hoped it would. That being said, there are still some reserves back here, although they have been peppered down a little bit probably by some of the missile units. And there are some decent units left over, so there's certainly a lot left here for a last stand, but I don't know how the defenders could possibly pull this back at this point. Aragonese Hidalgos have gotten themselves out of a pretty ugly situation, and it seems like the dismounted nobles are going to search for targets elsewhere. Aragonese have a great opportunity here for a countercharge, but it doesn't seem like they're going to get it. Very unfortunate indeed, but the Alsatian nobles aren't really going to get a great charge here either, so this is just going to be a bit of a slugfest. There's a unit of spears nearby, some ministerial spearmen, could be exactly what the doctor ordered. That would certainly help turn the tables here against the Alsatian nobles. Ooh, the Aragonese player pulling out one unit, but leaving the other one under the bus. I don't understand why they wouldn't bring the spears forward here. This seems like the perfect opportunity to get at least a small win over the attackers, which is something that the defenders desperately need. Well, down here, it's ugly. It's real ugly. The Almacaden have been nearly beaten to the point of submission. Some dismounted high period Poulain Knights here, a very ragtag company of merely 30. What we got over on this end? Almogavar Crossmen, well poised to exact a reasonably demanding toll here. A lot of Alsatian units that are quite vulnerable to that fire, all stacked into one little area. And now they're about to snag themselves on a small company of dismounted Poulain Knights, but I don't think they're going to have the courage to stand for too long. Meanwhile, the final line here, manned by the ministerial spearmen, 2 companies of them, is going to have to hold against the ducal axemen. Very elite units from Lithuania that they've invested a good deal of resources into. And more reinforcements being brought up here. Looks like a lot of ducal spearmen. This looks like a great screenshot, by the way. Oh yeah, I'm gonna get that. Another company of spearmen charging in here. And this is pretty ugly. They could hold there for a while, but the Alsatians are well on their way to outflanking this position as well. Now there are some units that they could bring forward. It's unfortunate that the Aragonese are not doing this. There's some dismounted Hidalgos here. I don't know exactly how powerful they could be, but there's absolutely no reason not to throw them out here to prevent exactly this from happening. Oh, never mind. Those are some routing units, some Poulain Knights routing through their own units. Not going to do anything for morale at all, I think. But yeah, certainly these units could be brought forward to at least try and block this passage, but that being said, it doesn't seem like the Alsatians really have any interest in moving forward, which is a little bit strange to me. There is a lot going on, however, so. Alsatian nobles beating back an exhausted unit of Hidalgos. Meanwhile, over here, what opportunity the spears had to move in and support their cavalry has been lost, as the ministerial spearmen are now locked in mortal combat here with some dismounted Alsatian nobles, and it really seems like the nobles are going to get the better of this fight. From what I understand, and I believe I mentioned this earlier, they are great at cracking open heavily armored infantry like the tin cans that they are, and they are just going to town on this unit of ministerial spearmen. It seems like the defenders have accepted their fate, and now they're moving back to get themselves into position for a final stand. Let's see what we got going on over here. Ooh, the dismounted Aragonese Hidalgos have been brought forward, and they seem to be holding the line against some pretty incredible odds. I would certainly chalk that up to the... well, they've got that halberd icon, so I assume they're pretty good against armor, but a lot of these units have been fighting for a while. I would expect them to be quite tired, and I would probably be wrong. Active, and that one at least is very tired. Ooh, now with the arrows pouring in support, it's really just a matter of time. Foot Turker Poles from Jerusalem, one of the few contingents from Jerusalem, I believe, that are still remaining on the fields. Moving forward in support, Ministerial Spearmen still fighting it out. The Cosmopolitan force here, I think we've got forces from both Lithuania and Lorraine who have joined forces to try and push this this final choke point and remove all hope of victory from the defenders once and for all. What do we got over here? Oh no, the Almogavar crossbowmen. They would have been great to have either for shooting into this choke point or for supporting the Aragonese dismounted Aragonese Hidalgos. But now they have been silenced, not only by a unit of cavalry, but a couple of dismounted Bajorija who managed, it looks like, to find a pretty conspicuous gap in the defenders' lines. I think part of this problem was they put a barricade here quite carelessly, and that does prevent them from being able to move down here and easily reinforce this area. So they kind of bottled themselves in a little bit, which is unfortunate. So we got going on over here. Dismounted Hospitalier Knights proving their worth in combat against the dismounted Alsatian nobles. Seem to be having a difficult time. Those Alsatian nobles are absolute bruisers. Ooh. Struck down from the rear. Not very honorable, but it's certainly effective. Oh, and there goes an arm. I think I just got a new hoped. Dismounted nobles seem to be pulling it back. Hospitalier Knights doing their best. There are still some pretty decent infantry units still remaining. Dismounted Hospitalier Knight unit fighting against a Ducal Axeman seems... I would give this one, I would think, to the Hospitaliers, given the large fatigue disparity between the two of them. Let's see. Templar Bodyguard, one of the few remaining cavalry units for the defenders. Great opportunity here. These units are largely, I was going to say largely undefended, but of course there's a couple of companies of the nobles of Alsace moving up the rear. What do we got going on over here? The King's Bodyguard locked in combat against some exhausted spearmen. Seems as though they've dismounted and are fighting on foot against the spearmen, which maybe not a bad idea. Certainly seems to be a fairly even fight, but that's not going to last for too much longer once those Pavis Armbruchte have been brought forward in support. Lithuania just seems to have no end to their numbers. They're just coming in from all angles. And we have here a mass rout of the dismounted Hospitalier Knights. Both companies fleeing for the hills, and the few survivors can get run down by the Alsatian Cav. Ooh, an absolute nightmare here, and it doesn't leave a whole lot left for this last stand, and we are running out of time. I think it's safe to say that this fortress is thoroughly lost. Let's take a look at the damage. 2,250 men. That's a substantial, almost 2,250. That's a substantial loss on the part of the defenders, but it was just all, or the attackers rather, but it was just still all too cheap. The defenders just weren't able to get the little wins that they needed that can snowball into a greater victory. I didn't see too many areas on the field where they were really winning, at least where they managed to achieve a lasting victory. Certainly the defenders' vigorous efforts managed to swing things in their favor a few times in a few different places, but ultimately, you know, it's hard to critique. I don't know too much about unit stats in this game, but certainly they didn't defend their ramparts the way that they should have, and it just allowed Lithuania to walk all over the defenses on their part of the battlefield. And the fight outside the wall ended up being a very costly waste, ultimately a waste of resources due to the lack of manpower. So if they were going to commit to a flanking movement like that, I think that should have been the decisive part of their strategy. That should have been the thing that they tried to support the most, because that's where they may have won or lost the game. Just things like that. So a really good replay, a lot to see, a lot was going on. I tried to cover as much as I could. But yeah, a really cool game. And I want to thank Gambling for sending it in to me. I love the winter map. I love that the defenders actually sallied and tried to do their best outside the walls. They didn't just wait for the attackers to come to them. I really, really enjoyed that, although it did, of course, suffer from being a little bit understaffed, which ultimately tore victory from their grasp. But let's go ahead and end the replay there. We'll take a look at some of the stats. Now, this would be Lithuania. Their units didn't do too bad. Some of the Lithuanian late period axemen, they don't look anything like in the card like they do on the battlefield, do they? Some of them did the Lithuanian axemen almost universally did very, very poorly. Ducal spearmen did well. County spearmen, it was a mixed bag. The ducal infantry, though, that probably performed consistently the best. Dismounted Bajorija, again hit or miss, although this unit got 180 kills, very impressive. Retinue archers, some of them did well, some of them just kind of shat the bed a little bit. Smolensk Boyars, almost completely destroyed, but I think they were quite decisive. Decisively used in the fight outside the walls over on, I believe that would have been the northern half of the defense. Crown of Aragon just really weren't getting much out of their units. Some of these peonies here ended up losing, and I think that's probably because of an admit defeat. But they didn't get a single kill. These guys were obviously fighting, didn't get a single kill. Just a fairly disappointing performance overall, and a lot of their crossbowmen I think could have exacted a much heavier toll from the attackers than what they ended up being able to accomplish, mostly because it seemed like the Aragonese player was very eager to get them into melee, and I personally don't understand the strategy behind that, but maybe someone down in the comments can enlighten me. Let's see, Lorraine. Dismounted nobles, they did pretty well, especially this one, 177 kills there, but they were both beaten back with heavy losses. The Alsatian Ritter doing extremely well for themselves. Hit or miss with the late period Chevalier. It's really not clear if they were worth it or not. Some of these Pavis crossbows did okay. 129 though is exceptionally well. The noble units, the mounted nobles I should say, did pretty well. 35 kills in that Great Bombard, way more than I would have expected. And then Jerusalem. Jerusalem seems like on average they did better than their ally Aragon. It certainly seemed like they were a little bit more organized and prepared. At least that's what it looked like to my eye. 63 kills in the catapult, not too bad. Not as good as it could have been, I think, given the position that they had. And their cavalry all did fairly well. Yeah, there's only a few units here that really weren't able to accomplish much. The Poulain Knights, I was very disappointed. I was hoping that they would be a bit more effective than they were, but it might have just come down to how they were utilized by their commander. But yeah, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. It was a really cool battle. Again, thank you to Gambling for sharing this with me, and ultimately enabling me to share it with you guys. And I hope you'll join me for whatever comes next. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.